Hey guys, welcome back to my part two of the VLAN configuration, right? So the part one was all about me explaining what the VLANs are, when are you going to need VLANs in your network, and how are you going to configure the VLANs in your network, right? So the advantages of the VLAN, we said like we kind of like logically separating devices in our local area network. So now we're gonna go through the steps of configuring these, configuring VLAN in a switch. So we said VLANs is a layer 2 protocol. So it's going to be done or going to be configured on a switch. So we have the switch now here, and then as I said, by default, all of these devices are part of VLAN 1, right? So they will, once you plug in these devices and then assign them IP addresses, they will be able to communicate because they are all under VLAN 1. But we want to change that when I assign this port to VLAN 10, this one to VLAN 20, VLAN 10, and then VLAN 20. And then first, we want to start with them being on the same subnet. So right now, this one is on the same subnet with all of these devices, and then they are all able to communicate with each other. Let me quickly show you that. So these devices by default, we say they are on VLAN 1. I haven't configured any VLANs, meaning that now all of them, they're still on VLAN 1, right? So they all must be able to communicate right now because they are also in the same subnet. So they must be able to communicate. So now what I want to do is just to run a ping command, which will we use to test connectivity between two devices. So let me go to command prompt and then ping 192.168.10.2. You see, this server is able to communicate with that PC. And then let me ping 3 because they are all on the same VLAN. But once I start separating these devices and put them in different VLAN, then you will see that they won't be able to communicate because I've logically separated them. And then let me ping the 4th device. As you can see, so all of these devices are able to communicate, right? So that means they're in the same VLAN. Let's try to see they're in the same VLAN, same subnet. Now let me go to the switch and then show you what I mean by that, and then go to command line interface. So all the command line interface, this is where we're going to make a lot of changes there. So I want to go to privilege mode. I type in enable, which is the command that takes you to privilege mode. So on this video, I'm assuming that we have done our first video. We've gone through our first video whereby we're going through different commands, and then when I'm going to type those commands, we spoke about different privilege modes. We spoke about different platforms, right? We said we have user view mode, we have privilege mode, we have global mode, and then the commands that you can apply there. So now I'm only focusing on the configuration of the VLANs, right? So I'm on the switch now on privilege mode. I want to show VLAN, right? If there's any VLAN configuration, let me quickly show you that. So as you can see, show VLAN, right? So I want to see what VLAN are running, what VLAN are configured on this switch. As you can see, all of these ports that I have on my computer on the switch, right? They are all part of the default VLAN. So default VLAN is VLAN 1. Right, so meaning that once you plug in any device and assign it an IP address, we'll be able to communicate with any device on this subnet, on this switch, because they are all on the same VLAN. Okay, so there's no VLAN that has been configured so far. So now let's start to configure VLAN. So here are the client requirements. The client requirements are that this is the requirements coming from a school. So VLAN 10 is supposed to be the students, right? So they are all plugged into the same switch, but we want to logically separate them using the VLAN. So they say VLAN 10 is for students, right? So you want to separate the students from the lecturers. So students will be VLAN 10, and then lecturers will be VLAN 20. So we don't want the students to have access to the VLAN 10 for the lecturers, right? VLAN 20 for the lecturers. So we want to separate the two. So meaning that, let's say maybe you have classes, all of your computers that are in the classrooms, they must all be on the VLAN 10 for students. And then all of your computers for lecturers, they must be on VLAN 20. So we're separating the two departments or the two groups, right? So that's what we want to do using this VLAN. All right, so now I want to configure VLAN. So I want to go to global mode, config team, and then create a VLAN first, right? So you got to create a VLAN. Let's say VLAN 10, which is for students, right? And then give it a name. Let's say students, right? So this one is for students. So meaning these VLAN will be the classroom computers, right? So students. And then another VLAN for teachers or lecturers, right? VLAN, let's say 20. And then name, that's our teachers, right? Or lecturers, educators, right? So let me quickly save that. Let me say end and then show running configuration. So these are the interfaces, nothing to show, and then show VLAN. So you notice now here we have created VLAN 10 and VLAN 20, but we haven't applied it to a port. We haven't applied it to any specific port. So now the next step is to assign the port to this VLAN. And then one thing that one need to know is that this interface or this port here that we have here from the switch to any end device, the mode, we have two modes when it comes to, not two modes, but I want to talk about two modes, right? There are more than that, right? But for Cisco, let me only cover the two modes for now. We have the access mode. So any port that connects to end device, we call it, it's supposed to be a switch access mode. It's supposed to be in access mode. And then any port that connects a switch to a router or a switch to a switch, that must be a trunk, because this is where all of the VLANs will be traveling in. So interface that connects a switch to a switch must be a trunk. Same with router to switch must be a trunk. And then interface from switch to end device, or let me not say interface, let me just say port here, right? Or interface or port. Port from switch to end device must be in access mode, right? And then after assigning, so first one is you go inside the switch using this command interface. You go inside the interface using this command, interface F0/1. And then after that, you can type in switch port mode access. So this means this interface is the one that connects to an end device. That's why I make it what? An access. If it was connecting to a switch, switch to a switch, I was going to make it a trunk. If it was connecting a switch to a router, I was going to make it a trunk. But this one connects to as an end device. And then you're going to specify after that what VLAN does it belong to. So the command is switch port access VLAN, then the VLAN number. Number 10 is for students, right? Then number 20 is for the educators. So let's go through that. So we are inside the switch now. We have already created VLANs there, right? So 20 and 10, but we haven't assigned any port to this VLAN 10, right? So now that's what we want to do. And then we're going to come back and check here which port we've assigned to this this VLAN. Okay, let me say config T, right? And then interface, what interface is it? So you can see here it is interface F04. So I want to make it a VLAN 10. Interface F0/4, switch port mode, making access port, because it's a port that connects a switch to an end device, right? And then another command will be switch port access, right? Access VLAN number 10, and then you can do W for saving that, do right, or end, and then you type in right here to save that to your startup configuration file. So now I can say show VLAN. So VLAN 10 now, as you can see now, there is the VLAN 10 students, right? And then what interface has been assigned now? You see now VLAN F0/4, interface F0/4 is no longer part of the default VLAN. It has moved to VLAN 10, right? So we have another one that's supposed to be VLAN 10. If we check here, it is this interface, right? So F0/2 must be VLAN 10. So let's go ahead and do that again. So there must be two ports here that are part of this VLAN 10. Okay, and then we say config T, and then say interface. I'm lazy. I wanna just use an up arrow to bring back the previous commands. So F0/2, and then I wanna bring back the switch port mode access, right? And then switch port access VLAN 10. So do W. I wanna save that, and then end, right? Save that, and then let's show VLAN. You will see. So as you can see, now we have two ports that are part of VLAN 10, which is F0/2 and then F0/4. So now these two ports are part of the VLAN 10. So which other port now is supposed to be part of 20, right? So before we moved them to different VLANs, they were all able to communicate. And then after we're done with that, we want to test if they're still able to communicate since we have logically separated them using the VLAN. Okay, so now we want, this one is VLAN 20. What interface is that? What port is that? F0/1. So you look at this part here, the port close to the switch, not the port on the device, but the port on the switch. Okay. And then config T, and then interface F0/1. You can also create a range, but I just want to show you this one by one, right? Interface F0/1. What else do I need? I want to say switch port mode. Start with the mode, your access, and then switch port access VLAN. You have VLAN 10. No, these ones are VLAN 20 now, of course, for lecturers, right? For educators, VLAN 20. And then we have another one here. This is F03, right? As you can see here, the port next to the switch. Okay. And then let me just quickly do an up arrow, and then I don't have time to type in the entire commands. Now, switch port mode access, and then switch port mode. I want to check. Where is switch port mode access? VLAN 20. So it's VLAN 20, right? Then let me just say end, and then write, meaning save this from configurations, build configuration, and then show VLAN. So VLAN 20 must have two ports now. As you can see now, we have these on VLAN F0/1, F0/3 on VLAN 20 for teachers. So you can see now I've taken ports from here and then added them on these VLANs. That's how you add ports from the switch to this VLAN. So that's how you create VLANs. And then the rest you can see default active, they're still under the default VLAN, which is VLAN 1. So now let's test the switch. Let's test this ping. So this server was able to ping 192.168.10.2. We want to see now if it will be able to do the same thing, right? So this must be VLAN 20 right there. Okay, let's do that. Let's say, let me use an up arrow. Let me start with the VLAN 2. So now 192.168.10.2. So request timed out, right? So they are no longer able to communicate because we have changed the VLANs, right? They are in a different group. So that now when these devices, on the devices that are on VLAN 10, broadcast a message, the broadcast message will be contained in that VLAN. It will be limited, or it will be limited in that VLAN. So it won't move to VLAN 20, right? So we've logically separated these devices. So let's try another one. Let's say 3. You see, it's able to communicate with VLAN with 192.68.10.3 because he is on VLAN 10, and then .3 is also on VLAN 10. Let me see who's VLAN 10, who's 10.3. What's your IP address? Tell us your IP address. Show us your IP address. You see, 10.3. So these two are still able to communicate because they are on the same VLAN. But now, this server and then the server and then that device, that laptop, they're not able to communicate anymore because they are on different VLAN, even though they are connected to the same switch, but we have logically separated. It's like creating two switches in one switch. Okay, that example doesn't make sense. Like it. Okay, so it's like you're creating groups within one switch, right? You're separating the devices, right, using the VLAN, so that the broadcast domain. So we had initially we had one broadcast domain. So these devices were all able to communicate, and then if this server broadcasted a message, all of them will receive that message. But now the broadcast domain, it is controlled, or it is contained in that one specific VLAN because of what we've done, what we've configured already, right? So let me see. Okay, we've tested the 2. Let's see if he's able to communicate with the .4. So now he can't communicate with the 10.4. But okay, let's say now one way or the other you want to create what we call an inter-VLAN, right? So on part 3 of the VLANs, we're going to create the inter-VLANs, whereby we have, let's say you just want to separate these devices using the VLANs, but want them to be able to communicate, but you're controlling the broadcast domain, meaning that you have a broadcast domain using the VLAN. We've created like smaller broadcast domains using the VLANs, but you still want these different departments to be able to communicate after that. right? So you created the VLANs only to contain the broadcast domain in that small department, in that small range, right? But you still want them to be able to communicate. So what you can do is you can create the inter VLAN, whereby different VLANs in the same network will be able to communicate. So you can maybe have one router that also, or you can put them on different IP at different subnets so that they will be able to communicate all of them. And then you will need a router to create what we call the inter VLAN, or you can use one router and then configure what we call router on a stick. So all of these devices will be able to share that routing information around. So guys, that's it for the VLAN layer 2, how to configure VLANs. So I'm done. The first video was all about what is VLAN, the theory of VLANs, why will you create a VLAN. But now the part 2 of this is all about how to configure VLANs within one switch, right? So we have logically separated that. Okay, so you can see now VLAN 10. So only VLAN 10 is only devices that are on VLAN 10 are only able to communicate with devices that are on VLAN 10. And then VLAN 20, they're only able to communicate with devices on VLAN 20. So this one is VLAN 20, and then that one is VLAN 20. Let's check something. Let me check there. What's the IP address of this one? It's a 10.2, right? And then the IP address of this one, let me check, a 4. So this 10.4 must be able to communicate with the 10.2 because they're on the same VLAN and then they're on the same subnet, right? Same VLAN, same subnet. Let me quickly show you that they must be able to ping 192.168.10. We said it's a 2, right? So you see, they are still able to communicate because they are on the same VLAN. Okay, thank you guys. On the next video, I'm going to show you how to configure the inter VLAN. So you have logically separated your devices, and then you want to control, you have logically separated your network, and then you want to control, you want them to be able to communicate within that network, but you're just controlling the broadcast domain, minimizing creating more broadcast domain within that network, and then also resizing the broadcast domain. So I just want to show you how to configure that on part 3, right, where you create the inter VLAN, allowing VLANs to be able to communicate. All right, that's it for now. See you guys on my next video. If you like my videos, please subscribe and then share.